Interestingly enough, our largest investor in Israel is Israel Corporation. They own the refineries in Israel. Israel refineries are effectively big oil in Israel. So they import all the oil into Israel, they refine them, they send them to all the gas stations. Our investor and partner in Denmark is called DONG, Danish Oil and Natural Gas. Oil, O stands for oil in that case. And it's interesting that these guys get it first. Because when they look at the equation, they look at the math, the economics beyond what we see. They look at the battery divided by miles, add the electricity, the clean electricity, they get to a price that is roughly in the 6 to 8 cents a mile. They say, if you can do 6 to 8 cents a mile, I'm never going to get there with my oil, so I'd rather move into your business. We're seeing it in all the global oil companies are running towards the end of their known reserves. And they're saying, I need to be in business of supplying transportation energy. If that's the next thing, if that's what's beyond petroleum, maybe that's where I need to be. So we're starting to see a lot of interest at that level, obviously different in the case of national oil companies, but it's coming in there. There's interest also on the generation side. Just a small anecdote. In Israel, we said we only want to use clean electrons. So we want to put in, even though it's hard to measure an electron on the grid, but we said we want to add to the grid clean generation at the same amount as the cars that we're putting in. So for every car, we'd put 1.2 kilowatts solar generation in the desert in Israel.
Making your cars sort of energy neutral or carbon neutral.
Form of our
build a virtual oil field.
Right.
Okay, we TiVo it. We sell it in the peak hours to the grid. We buy it back from the grid. But by and large, we put the same number of electrons as we use. We went to the infrastructure ministry and we said, we need to put an area here of solar, so it's a big area. It's not too big, but I said, okay, what if there is oil in there to supply all the cars in Israel? And we want to dig in. And they said, but there is no oil. I said, yeah, but let's say there is. And they said, well, if you can prove it, we can let you build. And we basically said, let's build a solar plant right here. And let's put it before the cars come in so we have full coverage.
Right.
On the case of New York, I think one of the things you have to remember is that most of the time you will drive and fill and not swap. In the swap station, basically all you need is the number of batteries to cover for practically 30 minutes worth of swaps. Because 30 minutes later, the battery that you put out 30 minutes ago is already full. And you put it back into the next car. So we always think of who fills up the gas station with gasoline. In this case, the electrons keep on coming. The grid knows how to send the electrons. It's just the last 10 inches that you pour in with a mechanical device. Everything else comes in through the grid.
Dave, a last quick point before we wrap up our session.
Just a quick point on the issue about the oil company. I think from a technologist perspective and looking at technology adoption over the last 35, 40 years of my career, we can't sit there and say we're going to depend on the government making this happen. Although, I mean, I hope that the government does take the initiatives and does step up in the way we looked at it and said that's not going to do it. And we certainly are not living in fear of the oil companies and their position that they've got. Our position has been if we can drive costs out of this solution, if we can make the economics of it work, that fundamentally the batteries last for 10 years and the cost per unit of energy stored gets into a reasonable space. And we have a line of sight to that as an industry, not just this company, but there's a line of sight to that point. Now, we're buoyed by the fact that oil is at $130 a barrel. Because we're talking $20, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation here today, frankly. But the fact that it's there and it's not likely to go back, I think we're heading in the right track in that regard. The other thing I want to say is that I think Shai is on the right track with his thinking about this stuff, and I'm hoping what he does, he's able to change MPG to DPM, which is dollars per month.
Well, that's a great note to end on. We've run out of time. My great apologies to the people standing there.
Thank you, Vijay.
I think the real lesson is, to quote Edwin Land, the founder of Polaroid, sometimes coming up with a new idea means stop having an old idea. We've certainly seen a lot of that from our panel today. Let me bring back Dan Riker again. He's going to tell us about what will happen during the break.